So let's talk about how nature works. It's this beautiful, intricate dance of harmony. But what happens when we step on its toes? That's what we're diving into today.
All right, let's kick things off with a bit of a head-scratcher. Picture this. Elephants, right? These majestic animals of the forest. Why on earth would they suddenly show up in a human village? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. It's dangerous for them. It's dangerous for the people. So what's going on here?
Well, the answer, it turns out, is pretty simple and kind of heartbreaking. It all comes down to survival. Their habitats are shrinking. Their water sources are disappearing. So what are they going to do? They're forced to look for food and water wherever they can find it. And sometimes that means wandering right into our backyards. This single issue, well, it's the perfect starting point for everything we're about to unpack.
Okay, so to really get a grip on this whole situation, we've got to zoom out. Let's go back to basics, kind of like Biology 101, and look at the actual building blocks of nature itself.
So, first things first, what's a habitat? You might think of it as just an animal's home, but it's so much more than that. A habitat is like an all-inclusive resort for an organism. It's got everything it needs to live: food, water, a place to hide, the whole shebang. For our elephants, that perfect resort is the forest.
And here's where it gets really cool. Every single habitat, no matter how big or small, is made up of just two types of things. You've got your biotic components. That's all the living stuff. The plants, the animals, even the tiny bacteria. And then you have the abiotic components, all the non-living stuff like sunlight, water, and the soil. And you absolutely need both for anything to work.
And these parts don't just exist randomly. They build on each other, step by step. It's like building with Legos. You start with a population, say a bunch of the same kind of fish. Then you add in other populations, the frogs, the dragonflies, the water lilies, and boom, you've got a community. And finally, you put that whole community into its environment with the water and the sunlight, and that's it. You've built a complete ecosystem. Okay, so we've got all these different living things hanging out together in an ecosystem. But what are they doing? How do they interact? Well, a huge part of it boils down to one very simple, very primal question. Who eats whom?
Think of it like a play. In every ecosystem, there are three main roles in the cast. First, you have the producers. These are your plants, making their own food from sunlight. Then come the consumers. They get their energy by, consuming other things. And last but definitely not least, you've got the decomposers. These guys are the unsung heroes, the cleanup crew. Fungi, bacteria, they break down all the dead stuff and recycle the nutrients so the whole show can go on.
And here's a super simple example of how that energy moves. It's your classic food chain, right? The grass makes energy from the sun. The hare eats the grass, gets that energy. Then the fox eats the hare and gets its energy. It's just a straight line from one to the next.
But that's a little too simple, isn't it? In the real world, it's not a neat little chain. It's a messy, tangled, complex food web. That fox might also eat a bird. The hare might get eaten by an owl. All those simple chains are woven together into this incredibly intricate network. And the key takeaway? Everything is connected to everything else. So, if everything is connected in this giant web, what happens when you tug on just one tiny thread? Exactly. You get a ripple effect that can shake the whole thing. Let's make this real. Let's jump back to the 1980s in India. At the time, Indian bullfrog legs became this big export item. So, what happened? People started harvesting tons and tons of these frogs, pulling them right out of their ecosystems.
The first result was, pretty obvious. The number of frogs just plummeted. But that was just the first domino to fall.
So remember that who eats whom question? Well, what do frogs eat? Insects. Lots and lots of them. So with the frogs disappearing, what do you think happened to the insect population? It went through the roof. And a lot of these insects just happen to be pests that love to munch on farm crops.
And this is where the ripple effect gets really bad. Farmers, trying to save their crops, started spraying way more pesticides. But that stuff doesn't just kill the pests. It gets into the soil, it gets into the water, and it damages the entire environment, which, of course, eventually affects us. See, one little change, removing the frogs, set off this whole chain reaction of disaster.
And listen, it's not all just about eating each other. Nature has all these other fascinating ways of interacting. Sometimes it's a total win-win, what scientists call mutualism. Think about a bee and a flower. The bee gets food, the flower gets pollinated. Everybody's happy. Sometimes one benefits and the other one, it doesn't really care. Like an orchid growing on a tree just to get some sun. And then, of course, there's the darker side, parasitism, where one benefits by harming another, like a tick on a dog. All these different relationships are what keep the whole system in a really delicate balance.
So after all this, it really brings us to the biggest question of all, doesn't it? Where do we fit into this incredibly complex, delicate system?
Let's take a look at a massive example, the Sundarbans. This is the biggest mangrove forest on the entire planet. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's this incredible vital ecosystem that literally protects the coastline and is just buzzing with life. But, and this is a big but, it is in serious trouble, and the threat is coming from us.
And how are we messing it up? Well, it's a familiar list. We're talking about deforestation. Sound familiar? That's exactly what's pushing those elephants out of their homes. We're talking about pollution, using up resources way too fast, farming in ways that can't last. Every single one of these actions is like yanking another thread out of that delicate web we talked about, and it's throwing the whole thing off balance.
Okay, so what? Why should you care about a mangrove forest or some frogs in India? Well, here's the bottom line. We are not separate from nature. We are part of it. Healthy ecosystems literally give us the stuff we need to live. Clean air? Thank an ecosystem. Fresh water? Thank an ecosystem. The soil for our food? You guessed it. So when these systems start to fail, it's not just a problem for the animals, it's a problem for us.
And that brings us to one last really powerful question to leave you with. A lot of people ask, could the Earth survive without humans? And yeah, it probably could. But maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe the real question we need to be asking ourselves is, can humans survive without the Earth?